Today, we are joined by what is arguably the textbook definition of a serial podcaster. Danny Brown is the host of 1 Minute Podcast Tips. He's also the co host of In and Around Podcasting, and My Other Podcast Is. Yes, that's the name. My Other Podcast Is. He is also, he works over at our favorite podcast hosting platform. He's head of podcaster support and experience at Captivate, which is what we use here to share podcasting tech with you all. His name is Danny Brown. Danny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And that was, I feel a little bit embarrassed by the intro when you say serial podcaster. That's one of the ones I've got live at the minute. I don't even want to show you the back end of my Captivate dashboard with all the archived and in test mode, etc.
Yes, no, there's for serial podcasters, there's like 3 dead shows for every live show that they are working on. There's definitely a lot behind the surface. How did you get into podcasting? Like, what led you into this space in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's primarily, I used to blog a lot. I was a blogger, first and foremost, and I got just tired. I'm not a great typer. I'm a 2-finger typist, so I'm not a fast, prolific typist. So it took a lot of work just to get a 500-word blog post out the door. I enjoyed it, but it just started to get draining. And I listened to a lot of podcasts. I enjoyed them. I was interested in the medium. So I thought, I'm just going to test it out, test the water, see what it's like. And I started just with a little test show, reading some old blog posts to get a feel for that. Enjoyed it and started a little hobby podcast back in 2017, I'm going to say. And from there, it's like a tattoo. You get one, you want more. You have one podcast, you tend to want more.
It is a little bit of an addiction, especially if you're having fun with it and being successful. Like where you are today with the 3 shows that we are going to highlight, it sounds like the overall theme of what you're doing is really focusing on helping other podcasters. And so I'm curious, in your experience and the things that you've been seeing lately, where is the big problem? Where's the big gap that podcasters are struggling with, or they're, missing the obvious, and, they could all really use some help with?
In fairness, I feel it's the part between launching a show and then getting to whatever success looks for you. So that could be monetization, it could be growth, it could be brand awareness of a business or consultant, etc. But there's so much information about what equipment should I use, what host should I use, how long should my episodes be, etc. So I feel there's a gap where a lot of people saw the podcasting boom from, let's say, 18 months ago, where all the money was going into podcasting from Spotify, Amazon, etc. So you saw a lot of agencies and a lot of consultants maybe saw this, and I'm sure you've come across it, Matthew, in your line of work, and you've seen some of the advice that have been given to your clients incorrectly before you've taken them under your wing. There's a lot of bad advice out there, primarily from bad actors, if you want, just seeing a fast buck, seeing that there's money in podcasting. Hey, I'm going to take part in that. So I feel the biggest gap is just giving the right advice as to, you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on equipment. You don't have to, have a paid podcast, so you don't have to monetize all that stuff. It's that stuff that I want to help with. And basically that's what Captivate's there for, to help podcasters in that sort of journey.
Yeah, I don't want to make this a huge commercial for Captivate, because I do that almost every episode, and there's so many things that, all the features that we could talk about on there. And one day I would love to have someone from the team talking about, what's been going on with the platform, or what the new features are. But it is true often that podcasters can often get hung up on the shiny objects and not be focused on the mission. And if you don't have a mission, doesn't matter how good your podcast is, right? I've never heard anybody say, Danny sucks, or I really don't like what Danny has to say, but his mic sounds so good, I'm going to listen to the show. So really focus on your mission, focus on your why, focus on the value you're delivering, and then start to enjoy the toys and the shiny objects and all the other features that will help you sound better, look better, broadcast better, reach your goals. Don't just chase after them because they're there. And this is coming from a guy who is a serial purchaser of tools than in search of a solution for. Right. I'm always on apps and we're like, oh, that's a great product. I'll use that eventually. And never do.
Yeah, and I try to think my wife gives me grief a lot because I tend to buy stuff, not super expensive stuff, but if I see a good deal on a mic or a mixer or anything like that, not so much now, but certainly in the past, I would just add it to my cart and then sneakily buy it. And it got to a ridiculous stage where I had a bunch of equipment that I would never use because I've now settled on equipment I want to use, for example. So yeah, I completely hear you now. It is the new toy syndrome.
So, with all that being said, let's talk about the toys that you use to podcast because that's what we're here for, to kind of take people on a tour of your studio. So, take us through, what are the basics of your tech stack, from camera, mic, mixer? What are the things that you use almost every time you jump into the studio?
Yeah, for sure. So my main mixer, if you want the interface, it's the Rodecaster Pro 2. I've had that about a year now. Got it just before last Christmas, so it was basically a Christmas present to myself. Well, birthday Christmas present. So that's how I justified it. So yeah, Rodecaster Pro 2 as my interface. I'm currently this mic is the Stellar Audio, TZ Audio, sorry, Stellar X2. It's a large diaphragm condenser. I've only just started using a condenser probably in the last 3 to 4 months, probably. I do have reach over. So the SM7B is my sort of go-to dynamic. And I apologize if anybody's picked up a bunch of noise there. Sorry. But I mean, that's just, I know that's like a more expensive mic, but it's taken me 7 years to sort of get to that stage. So it's not like a one-off purchase. But yeah, so that's I just sort of jump between the SM7B and the Stellar. I'm using this more at the moment. From the webcam, it's the Elgato Facecam, the original one, not the Facecam Pro, which is the newer 4K version. Um, and then MacBook Air 2020 M1 version, using the latest OS. What else have I got? Joby boom arm for the dynamic, and then the Elgato low profile arm for the Stellar. And I think that's primarily it. And then obviously XLR cables from the cabling point of view.
I'm so curious because you said you had that 7B, and you just started using a condenser. Why the switch from dynamic to condenser? And just, for those, by the way, who are listening to this and not watching it over on YouTube, Danny is in a very nicely set up space with nice, foam padding behind him and a curtain. So it seems like you have a well treated space, if that's going to be part of your reasoning.
That was a huge part. We moved to a different house, a different part of the country, 4 years ago, and um, just last year, my kids changed bedrooms, and what was my office, I moved into my daughter's bedroom, and it was really badly treated. I could move some stuff from my other office, but a lot of it didn't fit. So I had to go on a sort of rebuild from that. So that's why I was using the dynamic, and I used, prior to treating my office, I used the dynamic because, as you mentioned, it's a lot more forgiving when it comes to what it picks up and what it doesn't pick up. Whereas with the condenser, I've always liked the sound of the condenser, but never been in a position to utilize it properly without needing a whole bunch of post processing afterwards to remove room echo, for example, when using a plugin for that. So yeah, it's primarily I like the warmness and the natural tones of a condenser, especially this X2. It's a really nice little mic, and that's primarily it, mate. It's the fact that the room is treated really well, um, and I feel that I can use a condenser properly without it sounding harsh or not using it to its capabilities.
All right, that's fair. I suppose, though, if new podcasters are coming along asking you for advice, that you're still suggesting most of the time they grab a dynamic, just because, like you said, they don't have the experience, the time, or the resources to have a room properly treated to work with a good condenser.
Yeah, exactly. And the dynamic, you can get them so inexpensive as well, like $50 when it's on sale anyway, for the Audio Technica ATR 2100X. Great mic, USB plus XLR. So you can start off just using that with USB straight into your laptop. And it's forgiving, it sounds nice, and you don't have to worry. And I'm always a fan of people or podcasters, you mentioned it earlier, not worrying so much about the gear as opposed to look at your room first, look at your mic technique, little things like that that can help, you know, avoid having to buy so-called better gear to make you sound better.
Yeah, I've always been recommending that 2100 or the Samsung equivalent, the Q2U. But if for a few more dollars, I tell folks, get the Q9U. It'll give you a little bit of that deeper, bassier sound than you get from those, more dynamic, the ones that look like handheld microphones. So a few more dollars will give you a really good starting point with those microphones. Where did your tech stack begin? What was some of the early stuff that you used that either you miss or you long for or you regret
Hmm.
having?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I say I miss it. My very first mic was the iconic blue snowball ice. I think so many people have that little white dome. And even now, like Mark, my colleague over at Captivate's got that. Anytime he does a video, you'll see the snowball ice in the background on one of his shelves. I think everybody must start off with that. So I had that. Didn't know anything about condensers, dynamics, sound quality, etc. I just saw the mic, saw that other people used it, bought that, and I listened back to episodes and shows I did that and thought, ooh, oh no, because I was in like a really bad space. It was a big room, lots of hard walls, big windows, no treatment, and you can tell. So yeah, I started off the snowball ice going into my MacBook. From there, I did move to the Samsung Q2U. That was still going into my MacBook, and then I moved up to XLR, keeping the Q2U. And the first proper interface I had was the Scarlett Solo 3rd gen, little red one. Great unit, built like a tank. Then I started to get a bit better at understanding audio quality, equipment, all that stuff. So I moved up to, I think it was the Rode Pod mic that I changed over to. And then from there, because I was doing more face to face interviews, I switched over to the Motu M2. So that's another, really good audio interface, two mics in, two headphone ports, etc. Was it one? Anyway, so I moved up to the Motu M2. And I used that for the longest time. I tried the Vocaster one and didn't like it. I felt it was a bit harsh on the sound processing, and that might have been me trying to use the auto gain feature or the enhanced audio processing. I just didn't like it. It sounded like it had a loud noise floor on it. So I sent that back, got a refund, thankfully. And then mic wise, I kind of grew. So from there, and for the longest time, I used the Evo, the EV, sorry, RE320. Love that mic. Love the sound. Um, so I used that for the longest time, and then that's when I moved to the SM7B, and then ended up on this, and then somewhere in between all that, that's when I got the Rodecaster Pro 2.
Oh, that's quite an evolution, and I'm sure your wife is disappointed in how much of a budget that's been on microphones over the past years. What do you do with old equipment? Do you wind up selling it, keeping it, displaying it? What's your
Yeah, no, I don't have a need to do to keep it for mementos sake or whatever. So I tend to either sell it or I've donated some to like the local school, for example. They have a media club and stuff like that. So if I've got stuff that I feel they could probably use, that I'll just drop it off to the school. My kids go to it anyway, so I'm helping name out at the same time. And others I might just sell to other podcasters that I know. I know, for example, the RE320 went to a podcaster about 20 miles away from me, and he collects RE mics, electro voice mics. He just collects them, and he saw me put this up on a Facebook Marketplace, and he was on there says, "I'm going to e-transfer you now. Hold it, don't sell it, don't do anything." So that was funny, but it went to a good home.
excellent? That's a great idea, by the way. Checking around with some of the local schools to see if they have a media club or if there's somewhere to donate. I haven't thought of that as a way to deal with old equipment, but that's a fantastic idea and one that I hope others will hear and try and replicate in their communities.
Yeah, well, and I think as well, I mean, a lot of the schools and education boards struggle for funding, right? So they can't buy new, and you know yourself sometimes how much it can cost for equipment. So yeah, I'm not using it, and I'd rather go there than someone gets it and breaks or something.
Well, and frankly, too, even if they have the money, I often see these clubs buying just the wrong equipment because they're not, they're just getting bad advice from bad actors, like we were talking about earlier. And so, you often see them looking at them like, "Why'd you get that?" And so, yeah, that's a really nice thing to do. Well, again, once again, it's Danny Brown, host of 1 Minute Podcast Tips, co-host of In and Around Podcasting. He also does my other podcast and he works over at Captivate.fm. Danny, before we let you go, we're going to ask you just a few questions that we've been asking everyone. Is there a place in the podcasting space in general, equipment, distribution, listening, whatever, where you are begging to see some serious improvement and just it's not coming yet?
So there's probably a couple areas. One, and I've said this to lots of manufacturers, more on the um, Yeah, more on the live stream, I guess. So more on the Rodecaster Pro 2, like the Stream Decks, etc. Is a lot of them have got great processing on board and built in, but I feel there's some, and I don't know how they do it, but it'd be great to see. So a lot of the time, podcasters don't know about loft levels. They don't know about mouth noises. They don't know about sibilance, all that kind of stuff. So if there was something, I know some of them, they'll listen to you speak and then they'll set a processing profile for you on the Rodecaster or on the Mackie, etc. But it doesn't take into account all these little nuances. So it'd be great if there was something special with AI tools the way they are today that could really listen to any vocal tics that you might have. And that's a horrible phrase. So I apologize to anybody that doesn't like the phrase vocal tics. But if you have anything like that, it really adds. It supports VST plugins from the off. So you can save a VST plugin profile to your SD card and throw that into your Rodecaster, anything like that. So from an audio processing point of view, really, really set the podcaster up for success. And then I guess from say remote recording, so we're using Riverside at the moment. I use other platforms, a whole bunch of different ones, but generally all of them I feel have similar issues when it comes to sometimes not supporting multiple browsers, and that can really limit the guests. Making it easy for guests to jump on a podcast or to jump on a recording. So more support for Edge, for Chrome, for Safari, for Firefox, whatever, for mobile, for iPads, etc. That'd be nice to see, just to make it easier for non-podcasters. We're fairly easy. We'll jump around different browsers if need be. But sometimes, if you've got a guest on, it's not a podcaster, and they're limited by corporate VPN or anything like that, they can't easily jump to a Chrome because they're only allowed to use IE10, if that's still a thing. So maybe something like that. It's a bit basic, but it'd be nice to see, a bit more support on that point.
That's such an interesting concept and thought. And it reminds me when these platforms started to emerge, with Squadcast and Ringer were, some of the original ones. There was one that came out and they started off as a standalone application, right? It wasn't web based. You had to download this app, but it was more reliable because it was running, exactly the way it should run. Wasn't dependent on anything else. But at the time, it was rejected because everyone said, well, my guests don't want to download a program, right? Who wants to have it? Like, I've already got a browser. And then the pandemic hits, Zoom comes along, and everybody just downloads Zoom without a second thought. And so I wonder if maybe there's an appetite to return to that thought of creating a standalone desktop program so that you can avoid that question, have a little bit more control, a little bit more reliability with what you're trying to do.
It's funny. There was a post on one of the subreddits over on Reddit, obviously, on one of the podcasting subreddits, and someone was basically on about that. They were having issues with local recordings. So their guest was here, he was there, and another co-host was somewhere else, for example. And there was an issue with syncing up and all that kind of stuff. And what he was looking for was the option to have actually access to the local recordings on his own hardware, and the guest the same. So the guest could go into their downloads and look and grab their recording, send it over. And I felt that was similar where that would require an app download, because then the app would have to talk to your storage and all that kind of stuff. I believe, I'm not sure, but it's funny you mentioned that now, because that very Reddit user was wanting the same kind of thing.
I wonder if there's even an app that someone can make that just says, okay, I'm going to open up your QuickTime or your, Microsoft voice recorder. I'm going to check the, internal clock and I'm going to start it here, and everything is all synced up. So you don't even have to rely on these programs. Although we love Riverside and StreamYard and all these other guys. So I don't want to, I don't want to, put them in any peril. Great answers. What about technology? Is there a piece of equipment that you yearn for, whether it's a mic or a camera, like something that either already exists that you're just, it's out of your budget or you can't justify it, or maybe something that doesn't exist yet that you'd like to have in your studio or have available to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would love, because I don't really do a lot of video. So as you can tell, my webcam, but I use it, so like I say, it's a face cam. It's 1080, but it's not great. And I don't have the perfect studio lighting in that, so it never comes across quite crisp, as opposed to what I see, like looking at you at the moment, Matthew, and others on recordings. So it'd be great. I know there are cameras out there that do a lot of work for you. There's the Insta 360, I think it's called, that's getting a lot of good reviews. There was one, obviously, Elgato's got the new face cam. There was another one where it sort of tracks you if you're moving, so if you're going back and etc. But it'd be great if there was a camera that that ties into, let's say you've got an app for your lighting. So the camera app and the lighting app and your own browser, etc., whatever you're using, all talk to each other and actually adjust the stuff for you to give you the most optimal, lighting and the most optimal settings on your webcam, etc. Because I can't do that. I'm not a webcam. I'm not a photographer. I don't know advanced. I can Google stuff and I can follow Elgato and watch YouTube videos, but I still don't know what's the best. How do I place the light against the wall so it bounces naturally, get natural light coming in, all that kind of stuff. It'd be really cool if there was an app that you scanned your room with your phone, and then that talks to the apps that you've downloaded for your webcam, your light, and all that, and it just sets everything up perfectly and tells you where to place them in your room.
That is definitely something that I think a lot of people would want to see. So anybody here smarter than us in the photography lighting space, jump on that, and you'll definitely have some takers. I think in the podcasting space.
I would remortgage my house to get something like that.
At interest rates right now, I don't know about that.
Well, yeah, that's true.
All right, and lastly, besides the ones that you are producing, is there a favorite podcast out there right now? The one that, when that episode drops, you are waiting for it, you are stopping what you're doing, listening to it, right? It is a priority podcast you like to listen to.
Yeah, so there's two actually, if I'm allowed to.
Of course.
Awesome. So the first one is Fun Fact Friday with Leela and David. It's a dad and his 14-year-old daughter. Started when the pandemic just hit back in 2019, 2020, I guess. So 4 years ago. But really cool concept. Basically, they just pick a fact that they want to discuss, and they don't even really discuss it. They'll just say, hey, did you know that there are 5,000 types of trees? Or did you know that depending on what color the ears are on a duck, that dictates what color the eggs are going to be. That kind of stuff. It's like just facts that you never know. But the dynamic, because it's a father and daughter relationship, and the dynamic that it's a teen daughter, so she's gone, just going into high school and learning more information. All that's a really fun, sweet show. So I always look out for that coming, and because it's Fun Fact Friday, easy to pick up. It's every Friday. So really good. That's audio only, so they don't do a video version of that. And then Verbal Diorama, which is a movie. I'm a big movie guy, love movies. And Verbal Diorama with M, who's the host, she takes a little bit of a different approach, and she looks at the unknown history of movies and facts about it getting made, and the gestation period of the movie, and like the cast that could have been involved but weren't involved in that. So it's a real deep dive into huge movies and well-known movies, and she's really good at involving her audience as well. So she has a Patreon where you can submit, requests for movies, etc. But she also supports in the podcaster community by putting a pitch out every single week. Hey, my next episode, or the next episode I'm planning at the moment, is going to be about Dracula, or it's going to be about vampires or sci-fi movies or Gremlins, etc. If there's any podcasts that have published episodes about these movies or topics, shout me out, and I will make sure I include you in my episode and show notes, etc. And I'll give you a shout out on that. So a really nice way to support other podcasters.
That is a fantastic idea. And yeah, a really nice way to support other podcasters. I love the fact, by the way, we often ask this question of podcasters, and, let's say they do a business show or whatever. The podcasts they listen to tend to be related to that, topic or that subject. I love the fact that your two are just two things that you just genuinely enjoy, that give you pleasure and that, make you a little bit smarter. So fantastic. And I will definitely be checking out the Fun Fact Friday show. I love that kind of stuff. So thank you very much. Well, again, he's Danny Brown. He hosts 1 Minute Podcast Tips. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Co-hosts In and Around Podcasting. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. And my other podcast is linked to that in the show notes. And of course, head of podcaster support and experience at Captivate. And if you are just thinking about starting a podcast, or you're wondering why your podcast host doesn't have enough tools that will help you grow, help you monetize, just help you be a serious, better podcaster, we, of course, will have a link to Captivate in the show notes as well for you to check it out. Danny Brown, pleasure to chat with you. Thanks for joining me today.
You are very welcome, and thank you for the invitation.